Greetings! It is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It's time to continue our discussion on the lands, legends, planes, and planeswalkers of Magic the Gathering, where I take one of these topics and introduce you to it to help enhance your knowledge of the world settings of Magic the Gathering. Today I'm introducing to you a new plane, Ravnica. Ravnica, though, is just not the name of a plane. It's the name of a city which spans an entire world within this plane. So it is a massive metropolis spanning an entire planet throughout the plane of Ravnica. Businesses powered by boiler works and clan foundries have caused large amounts of industrial pollution to saturating a lot of the plane with this industrial pollution. And prior to the events of dissension, it was ruled over by 10 clans and a special enchantment called the guildpact for nearly 10 millennia. Now, it is the setting of two blocks, the Ravnica block and the Return to Ravnica block. I'm finally saying it correctly. Now, the hub of this city, the center of effectively everything that's going on here, is this one place that you can find actually some of the original surface of the planet. There are so many levels to the city that there's like undercities and city built on top of city. Only one place you can find, well, you can find it in other places, but this is like the most prominent, the largest piece of it. The literal top of a mountain carved off is the hub of the city. It is separated into 10 districts representing the 10 districts of the clan, but it is the hub of power, so to say, of the cities. And it's kind of a giant cylinder, as it has been carved away from being a mountain by those that are beyond the edges of the district into what it is now. Now, about 10,000 years before the first set in Ravnica came out, it was a world that was full of blood and war and violence, where factions were constantly battling it out with each other and murdering each other, and things were just breaking down into this chaos. At this point in time, leaders of 10 of the major factions sort of got together into this council to discuss what was going on, and the fact that they were having these conflicts they could not overcome. One of them, named Azor, he suggested this living enchantment, almost something. What he called it, the guildpact, which would effectively keep everything in check and allow the factions to attain some kind of peace, because just agreeing upon peace meant nothing at this point in time. They needed something to secure it. Now, there was still some fighting, but eventually the other 9 factions agreed upon this, and the guildpact was, of course, formed. The guildpact is a subtle enchantment that attempts to prevent the clans from dabbling each other's affairs or messing with each other's power bases. Effectively, it affects causality. It affects chance. And so things will occur and situations that will be in the favor of the clan in question that's being messed with, effectively giving it a better chance. This doesn't mean it does keep the peace. Doesn't mean it doesn't prevent conflict between the clans or the groups, but it does keep it pretty well in line. And in fact, those 10 groups that agreed upon the guildpact were the ones that eventually became guilds of Ravnica. So the 10 guilds do not mess with each other, and the guildpact enforces it. And again, as I said, clashes and battles still occur, but it's not so wide scale that it's breaking out like it used to be before the guildpact was enacted. And there is a celebration now that every group celebrates once a year. They celebrate the existence of the guildpact and what it has done to bring peace to Ravnica. So it's a big day-long celebration. Every guild member is a citizen of Ravnica, but not all citizens of Ravnica are a member of a guild. In fact, the vast majority of them aren't. They're just normal, everyday people living in the plane. Granted, they encounter the guilds every day in their normal lives. The guilds run a lot of different jobs within the city, keeping things going, so you're going to encounter them constantly. Now, it is in fact true that Ravnica is slightly isolated in comparison to the rest of the multiverse, Ravnica the plane. This doesn't mean you can't travel to planeswalking. It just means that it's separated in such a way that causes strange effects in it. Think of it almost like a kind of fold in space, a little bit. Now, this does have some effect, though, on the rest of the plane. The souls of the dead never really leave the plane. This means that things like spirits and ghosts are actually very commonplace there and plague the plane very often. But it also means that there's a strange effect that creatures that live there live longer. Like the average lifespan of a human is around like 120 years. Where on another plane, it'd be like 65, 70. So, especially in a plane that's as civilized as Ravnica. So you do have this juxtaposition that, like, a civilized world, human would live only, like, half the age of a human in Ravnica. And that's perfectly normal. Now, I will talk about the 10 guilds. I'm not going to go over them in super large amounts of detail, because there aren't any true lands in Ravnica. Each of these guilds takes up a territory. So when I go about and talk about lands for Ravnica, I'm going to talk about the guilds individually and the territories they control. And go use that as an example for them, because they are almost, in fact, nations unto themselves. So I'm just going to go over them briefly, just so you have an idea of how they are working within the city, too. So the Azorius Senate, best way to describe that is its legislative and judicial branches of the city. The Boros Legion is the standing army which protects the guildpact and keeps the peace. The House Demir is the shadowy guild that few think exist anymore, but in fact are there to take care of any illegal services that the city might need. The Cult of Rakdos is in fact a necessary evil if you don't think about it. They are in fact they provide the plane with an important service. These thrill killers are in fact the heavy labor force of the plane, so they are incredibly important, though very dangerous. The Golgari Swarm are the food providers and organic waste disposers. The Gruul clans have actually unfortunately fallen a lot. They're very loosely connected now and barely a guild, but they once were the protectors of the wilds that were remaining wherever they were within the city itself and in the plane. Now they're just a loose connection of berserkers that barely keep together. The Izzet League are in charge of all civil engineering works, but they are also the developers of new magical technologies and the science behind that. The Orzova Syndicate regulate trade and banking. The Silencia Conclave are in fact the major source of religion and the religious beliefs within the city, but they also patrol the more rural areas of the city and keep guard there. And the Simic Combine provides medical assistance and biological research. So each of these clans has an integral job that keeps the city functioning. Now, after the events of the first block, where things changed within the city, the guilds themselves had actually for a time broken down. The guilds effectively had dissolved, and many of their leaders had gone away. But this wasn't forever. In fact, what was remaining of the shattered remains, because there was infighting after the works of Dissension, that block, that set, the last in the Ravnica block, that the guilds themselves began to reform. Many of them under new leadership, some of them definitely not under new leadership, but they effectively changed themselves around because they had an opportunity to, because they weren't as pushed on by the guildpact anymore. Talk more about what happened in Ravnica in both those blocks when I talk about them in history videos, but just know for the fact that the guilds themselves eventually reformed. Again, some of them had new leadership, some of them did not. Some of them began to act slightly differently than they used to before. Many of them, even the ones that were acting a little differently, still kept up with most of the things that they had when they were controlled by the guildpact. The guildpact had effectively put them into their jobs, but tradition and habit had sort of kept them in it. So even when they reformed into their new versions of the same thing, or new versions that are slightly new, they still pretty much kept the same jobs. So when we're heading into Return to Ravnica, the guilds themselves have kept up with effectively where they were. Reestablished, possibly new leaders, but getting back into the same order that they were, keeping the city in line. And as we can see, now that they have a new guildpact, the living one, Jace, well, things are back to normal in the city of Ravnica, at least for now. So that's it for today. I introduced you to the city plane of Ravnica. It is technically both a city and a plane. That's the best way to say it. It is a massive planet covered in only one gigantic city that spans the entire globe, divided up into the power bases of 10 guilds. Of course, people live that aren't members of these guilds, but these guilds represent the power bases, the inner workings of the city itself and the plane itself, which is quite interesting in the way that it dynamically mixes together. And it's a place that's difficult to find, but once you get there, you can get back again, of course. It's interesting, and I will enjoy revisiting it when I talk to you about the guilds / the lands of Ravnica. So if any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows support for the channel, the Empire, and the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you could always check out my Patreon, linked in the description below. I can also recommend to you, if you want to check out some other Magic-related content online, Card Bazaar, They Said, We Said, and Tasty Snackies. These three, my friends of the multiverse, which we will be doing some more stuff together with, of course. You could have seen They Said, We Said on this week's Discussing Tabletop as a guest. Well, go ahead and check out their work. It's great Magic work, too. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.